Okay, so we're going to start off just talking a little bit about what EAL teachers do in the schools. An EAL teacher works collaboratively with the students, parents, teachers in the schools. They attend site-based meetings and parent-teacher meetings as and when asked or requested by the teacher or the parents. We help look for supports in the community that can help EAL students and in their English language acquisition. For example, volunteers, settlement workers, and extracurricular activities. We help EAL students build relationships within the community they live in by engaging them to volunteer, encouraging them to volunteer and sharing their culture. For example, making slide presentations about themselves and their culture. And at the middle school and high school, the EAL teacher works very closely with the classroom teacher, assisting students with tests and assignments. We track the supports and resources EAL students get and advocate for more, and we assist the teachers with student assessment and evaluation.
A quick look at who is an immigrant, a refugee, an asylum seeker, and a temporary foreign worker. So, a refugee is a person who has fled their own country because they are at risk of serious human rights violations and persecution there. An asylum seeker is a person who has left their country and is seeking protection from persecution and serious human rights violation in another country. For example, Syrian families in camps in Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. Immigrants are people staying outside their country of origin who are not asylum seekers or refugees, and temporary foreign worker is a person who holds a temporary work permit. At the same time, I would like to tell you that as far as school is concerned, all the students who come to our school system are treated in the same fashion immaterial of their immigration status. But this is just some information I thought we would share with you guys.
Okay, we have two scenarios, so I just want you to think about this for a few minutes. Imagine that you have arrived in a new country where you don't speak the language and where you will be enrolling your child in a local school. Think about arriving at the school for the first time, only to discover that no one at the school speaks English. Imagine the feeling of leaving your child in the hands of people with whom you can't communicate, nor can your child. The second scenario, now envision instead that someone speaks English, maybe with an accent, not very fluent, greets you at the door, and you see a picture of a Canadian flag with welcome written under it in the front hallway. What might you be able to accomplish as a parent in the second situation that you wouldn't in the first?
So, a look at what is culture, the system of shared beliefs, values, customs, behaviors, and artifacts that the members of society use to cope with their world and with one another, and that are transmitted from generation to generation through learning. And so, this iceberg concept of culture, which uh, some of you must have seen it at some point of time. So the surface culture is so different from what we see on the surface, and compared to the deep culture or the shallow culture, things like eye contact or ideals of child rearing, and the concept of being like a tolerance of physical pain, or for giving an example, is the eye contact is really something which I have encountered a couple of times in my experience. And the body language, or the thing about hugging, which is so common, like in Nova Scotia, not during these times, but in Nova Scotia it is really very common to, like, hugging is, and it's such a beautiful thing, right, to hug. But sometimes with students who come from different cultures, it is a little bit of like, you have to be careful if that is okay to do or not. And I've seen many a times that happens, that they kind of cringe a little bit, but over a period of time, again, they get used to it and they learn to enjoy it and realize that this is a sign, like somebody showing affection towards you. So it's but it is different, like it's the culture is something which we really need to keep in mind. Of just a few words which I thought we would learn together is in Arabic, when you uh, only because when you have a new student coming from a different culture, if there are a few words which you can learn to say to them in their language, maybe when you're saying it, you're not saying it in the right accent, and that the new student or your newcomer student gets a chance to correct you in some ways, or you bring a smile to their face because you might not be pronouncing it the correct manner. So marhaba and ahlan was ahlan are two ways of saying welcome. Arabic is spoken in all the Middle Eastern countries and almost 422 million speakers in the world who speak Arabic. Another language is Hindi, which is namaste is for hello. Mostly people from India say hello, but namaste is a very formal, very traditional way of greeting each other. This is Hindi is spoken mostly in India, 322 million speakers of Hindi in India. So you can take, I mean, any language you pick, I think if you Google it, you'll find some information, and maybe you can share it with your other students in the classroom. Who are going to be working with your newcomer student, just some information to share. Because living in rural Nova Scotia, I realize a lot of people do not know that there are these other languages which exist out there. Sometimes sharing this information is really very, very useful.
Okay. How long does it take to learn a language? Social language is 1 to 2 years, which is the BICS, basic interpersonal skills, and the academic language is 5 to 7 years, the CALP, the cognitive academic language proficiency. And this was developed by Jim Cummings. What is social language? Social language is when your students are talking to their friends on the playground, in the cafeteria, in the gym, or on the school bus. When you and your students are having an informal face-to-face conversation, and when your students go to the grocery store and read the shopping list, that's what we considered social. And oftentimes, a teacher will say to me, well, I hear them in the hall, they're speaking, they're doing really well. You know, I don't understand what the problem is in the classroom. And that's when I explain that academic language is much different than what we're doing on what they're doing in the halls or with their friends. Academic language is more demanding, complex than social English. An EAL student with social English proficiency may not necessarily have the academic English proficiency. And that's where sometimes there's a confusion with the teachers. They'll say, well, you know, I don't get it. Why can't they, you know, participate or whatever? They can't participate in the academic language because they don't have the academic language, which is usually what happens. And it is important for us to make this distinction. Academic English is the language necessary for success in school. It is related to a standards-based curriculum, including the contents area of math, science, social studies, and English language arts. Anybody have any questions on that?
We have a little video here for you. Sarah and her family arrived in Nova Scotia from Syria, and Sarah spoke very few words of English. So, quick, I think a minute.
Yep.
A little more than a minute.
Hi, Kazal. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And Ghazal, tell me something about your family.
My mama's name is Nada, and my dad's name Yasser, and my sister name Naham, and my name is Hazel, and my little baby is Jude.
How old is Jude?
2 months.
Oh, he's 2 months. And do you play with Jude?
Yeah, all the time.
Oh. And yesterday, did you guys go somewhere on the weekend? Where did you go?
We go to my dad's friend. We go to everywhere. We go to pools and we go everywhere. We play, we make gymnastics. And my baby all the time cry. My mom, we put him out. When we stop, we're happy.
Yeah. And the place where you went, where was that? Was it in
Quickly, the next video is a year and a half after being in Canada.
Okay, you're on, Naham. How are you?
Good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So tell me about your trip to the valley.
We went apple picking. Next we went to the park. Next we went to somebody's house. And we saw little fish. And we went getting some fish and eat them on Ahmad's house. We gave them to Ahmad. And Umar's family came with us. We went eating on a picnic table, and we ate pizza and yogurt and pop. Next we saw a library, and we went in and played the computers.
Oh.
And we
Okay, come on over here. There's a good spot.
we played on
Start on it.
park.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Notice the difference in confidence in the student and the more vocabulary like picnic table and other things which she added, apple picking. So a lot of picking up a lot of vocabulary. So language does improve, but it takes time and exposure, I guess.
The next slide, we talk about the considerations for EAL learners. Language learners best learn how to spell, read, and write new vocabulary when it's taught in a purposeful, contextual manner. Vocabulary should not be learned in isolation, but in context. So I know most teachers do that in the class, new vocabulary is introduced. So this is not only beneficial to the EAL student, but all students in the class. And students who read and write both academically and leisurely will be quicker to internalize spelling, vocabulary, and structural patterns. And this is known as content-centered or content-based learning, and research has shown that this approach is an effective way for both English language learners and learners of other language. What is really important here is that the teacher access the prior knowledge of the EAL student and build on the student's English vocabulary. So they refer to this also as transference. So when a student comes with their first language and they're able to use technology like Google Translate and translate to the second language, when they make those connections, the student is able to learn the spelling and vocabulary a lot quicker. And because a lot of them come with a lot of information, you know, they have a first language that they can build the second language on. Providing students with proper spelling of words in a word bank may be beneficial. Lots of times the teachers will ask the students if they want a word bank because even if they know the answer, sometimes the spelling doesn't come right away. Students should also be encouraged to create their own personal dictionary of words that are spelled correctly, translated, and defined in a meaningful way. I found this really good at the high school, middle school, high school, having the students to start building every time they found a new vocabulary to translate it from their language to the new language and make their little personal dictionary. It's a wonderful way to build on vocabulary. And new vocabulary should be introduced at the beginning of each new unit, and I know most teachers do that. Spelling and reading strategies that utilize initial, medial, and final sounds, as well as homonyms, phonics, digraphs, vowels, vowel pairs, etc., may need to be explicitly taught to language learners. So the next slide, the phonemes, they are That's the sound that a letter or group of letters make. I'm just going to just very briefly talk about this. And a phoneme is the smallest unit of speech. And when we teach reading, we teach children which letters represent those sounds. For example, the word hat has 3 phonemes, the H, the A, and the T. And digraphs are 2 vowel sounds. So the example that I like to give is that AI in rain and snail, and AY in birthday and play. And AI goes in the middle, usually always, and AY goes at the end. So that's just a little example of how language is learned. And it's if a student is just learning, like sometimes these basic things like the phonics and that will have to be introduced. This may be something at a lower grade, but sometimes in middle school, it depends on how much language that the student comes with. Considerations here for if the student's first language does not utilize the Roman alphabet, explicit instruction on proper letter formation may be necessary. Some of the things, not so much now because we use a lot of computers and stuff, but a few years back, there was a lot of issues with the students from the Asian countries. The teachers would be doing, would be writing on the board rather than printing. And the students wouldn't understand. It would look like a total different alphabet, so they wouldn't be able to understand that. Explicit instruction may also be necessary in order to teach students that text flows from left to right and front to back. Sometimes it's different in different countries. And language learners will need time and instruction in order to learn how to write English. And teachers should be aware when providing notes in cursive writing, which is what I just talked about, that many students are unable to read or write using the system. However, I do see lots of students coming that do have beautiful cursive writing, but especially students from the Asian countries, this tends to be a difficulty. I think the big thing to remember if you're teaching middle school or high school is that when students are learning a new language, they need more time. They need more time to process, and they need more time to think about what they're writing. So therefore, they may need more time to write tests. So oftentimes they'll come with me and they can have the extra time. And sometimes they need translators. And Google Translate's a great way for students to learn.
Some do-it-yourself ways to make your student comfortable, like preparing your students. A transition plan, like sometime it's quite useful to have. It can be pretty stressful for a student to be in a classroom when they have very low language. If they come from a completely different culture and country with a completely different language, to have them come to school maybe just 2 hours in a day or 3 hours in a day and then go back, but to have a little bit of a transition plan in place. It might not be necessary because most of our students love being in our schools. Our schools are such fun places. So they just love being in school, especially grade elementary and right up to middle school. Beyond that, high school might be a little a tough place. Smile, cheap and easy, post the agenda routine on the board if that can be done with pictures and assistive technology. If you could have pictures, mostly from the autism teachers who are autism experts, specialists, if you have in your school, if you can borrow pictures from them for the agenda and the routine on the board. Learn to say the newcomers' names correctly, because if you mispronounce it, then it really messes it up for them. So Google Translate or ask somebody who can just tell you how to pronounce it. Sometimes the names there are some silent letters in there. Learn a few phrases from the newcomers' student language, which is just hello or how are you. Just 2 or 3 are more than enough. Assign a buddy. A buddy would be one of the most important persons in the class for that young person coming into your classroom, because they are, and to have that one friend is so important in a new environment. Label items in the classroom in both languages. Maybe your EAL student will assist you to do that. If they know how to read and write their first language, they should be able to do this. Allow breaks. It can be exhausting to try and make sense of all the language coming at you. Positive body language helps because your student will read your body language before they understand your words. Encourage your newcomer to teach his or her classmates a few words from their language, numbers, or a simple song when they are ready. Allow your student to use their first language when they feel it necessary or helpful. This demonstrates that their culture, and their language are valued. And this is sometimes maybe they could do their classwork in their native language by using the Google Translate, and it just helps them to not be waiting for their language to get all their language and then start from that point. So whatever they have, with whatever knowledge they have, prior knowledge they have on the subject, they can start working on it by working in their own native language through Google Translate. It's just something which I think you should give it a try.
The next slide is the silent period. The silent period occurs due to a variety of factors, and occurs before the newcomers are ready to produce oral language. So again, it's really important here that if a student is a language learner in their class, not to call upon them or put them on the spot until they're ready, because this would embarrass them, especially at the middle school, high school. And this does not mean your students are not learning. They may understand what is being said, but they may not have acquired the confidence or enough language to answer you or to speak. And it is an interval of time during which they are unable or unwilling to communicate orally in the new language. The silent period may last for a few days, or it may last a few months. The length of the silent period, personality plays a key role. Normally, a shy, quiet person in their first language, in their native language, are going to be the same. You know, if they're shy and they're quiet, it's going to take them longer. And in many cultures, for example, girls are not expected to speak out. They play a more passive role in the family and in the classroom dynamics. And the bottom line, the more comfortable newcomers feel in your classroom, the quicker they will be able to learn. The more anxiety students experience, the less language they will comprehend. And in our experiences, small group activities with supportive classmates help. Especially, we were talking about having a buddy system for the new student, the EAL student is so important, because they don't know the school, they have no friends. Everything is confusing. It's all new. It's a new culture, new food. So they're experiencing lots of things, both inside and outside the classroom. So welcome signs, having empathy, understanding how difficult it would be is really good for the student.
So coming to the reporting time, which is so important for teachers and administrators, because that's something here about that. If the student in a recent arrival to Canada, and this is from the Newcomer's Guide to Nova Scotia Schools, and it is a reporting period, the teacher may choose not to assign a letter grade in some subjects or areas of the curriculum. It may be too early to properly assess the student's progress. As the child learns more English, he or she will be able to do more of the same work as the other students. The student's work can then be more completely evaluated. A little bit about home language maintenance, which is so important for the identity of the student, of the person. Why first language should be maintained? It reduces the stress of settling in the new environment. If you have your language, if you have at least that one language, helps to foster self-identification and pride. It connects children to their culture. All of the brain processing done to learn a language is useful for learning a new language. Speaking more than one language increases a person's ability to learn future languages. Literacy in the home language builds literacy in every other language they learn, and bilingual children are more likely to have higher academic achievement. Some reasons why students lose their first language is absence of educational opportunities in the first language. And this is especially true for rural areas. Like I live in Millie, and I, both of us live in rural areas, and we see this happening. And it's so much like things are changing a little bit lately since Nova Scotia is, our population has increased a little bit, but still we do not have any other language facilities or learning facilities in our areas yet. Language shift in the home, meaning all family members are using English more, even if the parents are not proficient in English. Attraction to majority culture, popular literature and media, and a lack of interest in the literature and media from the home culture because it's not available in our libraries, local libraries where we live. A strong desire for assimilation to the mainstream culture and the perception that belonging to a peer group means rejecting the home culture and not living in a community where the first language is widely spoken. I have
Something,
been going up to the library sometimes, sending these little notes which Paru sends us about books, and sending us books. So then I just send those to our school librarians. I also sometimes send it to the librarian, public library, and to see if they would like to bring these books. And sometimes they do, but it's not as much. So I think as EAL teachers, we should do a little advocacy here for our students for getting more literature in their languages around in our schools as well as in our community.
and just what you were saying there, Nanda, it's true because I think one of the things that I try to stress to my students is that their first language, their L1, is most important, and that they're just building on it, which is one of the reasons why we call this additional. We don't call it a second language because some students have more than one or two or three languages. They're building on their first language.
Yes.
And the other part that's really important, and I'll just share something from my own background. My grandparents were immigrants. One came from Paris and the other came from Scotland. And when they came to Canada through Pier 21, they spoke their language, Gaelic, fluent, and the French was fluent, but they did not teach it to their children, which would be my mother, and it was never passed down to us. So it was like a lost language because, again, they wanted to fit into the new culture. They didn't want to be different, and they wanted their children to have opportunities for the best jobs. And I'm so happy that things have changed now because we promote the first language. Your first language is your most important, and then you add to it. Your additional language would be your English or any other language. So that's really important to consider. So that's why if you hear your students in a little group and they're speaking, if you have a group of students from and they're speaking Spanish, it's lovely to hear it because their language is really important. So that's something that I certainly appreciate that when I hear that.
Yeah, I do seek out people in my community who speak any of the Indian languages that I speak, and it is really a pleasure to do that. Okay, next.
So some dual language projects that you could have in your classroom, have a poster labeled in a dual language after a field trip. Class rules can be in dual languages, and the students love to have you ask them to share their language. If the English word is there, you say, can you come and write it in your language? How to vote in dual language, parts of the body, plant or life cycle of a frog, health and nutrition posters, breads. They're different in all cultures, but all cultures make some kind of bread. The environment awareness poster, how to recycle your plastics, a bilingual flyer to attract visitors to your region, and can you think of some more? So one of the things that I did in my classroom was, because of the fire rules, we're not permitted to have too many posters, but my principal in one of my schools, I said there was bricks on the wall, and I asked the principal if I could write all the English words that we could think of that related to cross-curricular. And then the students would write it in English and they would translate it. So I had it all over the classroom on the walls. It wasn't posters. It was done in marker, and it was okay. It was neat. It looked nice. And the school happened to have bricks for the wall. So we used each brick as a kind of like we would put the word there, the vocabulary word, and it would be translated sometimes in 5 or 6 languages. So it was a nice way for the students to see that their language was appreciated. It was a nice way for the students to have a little project of their own.
So here is a little poster, which is just an example of how working with a buddy in Spanish and English, taking turns and whisper voices and listen to each other, help each other study with your buddy. Could be an example.
Does anybody want to share anything or have any ideas at this point?
All good.
Okay. How do I encourage home language maintenance? Maintain a child's home language through the initial adjustment period as much as possible. Use dual language books or apply a few keyword strips to the book's pages using the home language, using Google Translate. Encourage parents to keep speaking their home language with their children. Take the time to learn some words in the child's first language to support early communication. And I know that's not always easy, but I try. And I don't do a great job all the time. The kids love it when I'm trying to learn something new in their language. And if you have more than one student from the same culture in your classroom, allow and even encourage the children to speak to one another. And that's what I was just talking about before. Like, it's nice to hear the different languages. And sometimes in an EAL classroom, you could have up to 5 languages and people speaking and doing it in a respectful way, making sure that everyone's included. If there's a group of students around, that we're not excluding anybody and speaking a different language and excluding someone. But the students love it, and they do a really good job of including everybody. Cultural presentations, some suggestions. Parents and older siblings of newcomer students are invited into the classroom to present and share some cultural information with the classmates. And that's a great way to make the students feel accepted, and the parents too. Parents could read a dual culture storybook. The EAL teacher or the class teacher can read the part in English, and the non-EAL students can listen to what another language sounds like. Parents and their little assistants teach simple things like counting 1 to 5 in a different language, a song in a different language. And this helps the newcomer feel confident, and the classmates learn about a culture. And it's amazing when you go into, now that we have more students, EAL students, when you go into the classroom and you hear the English student trying to learn the new language from other students, and they're practicing to speak Spanish or whatever language it is at the time. So it's kind of nice. It's a way for, you see that the students are exposed to the different language. So therefore, being exposed to different cultures and languages, they seem to be more accepting. So it's nice to see.
So the next few slides we have some examples of some presentations that were done in different classrooms. So here's an Eid presentation, and students have made. So there's a student from Syria in this classroom. So they spoke, and a parent also came in and read a book and gave some information. Then they made some lanterns. This is a teacher, a mommy, and now she's a substitute teacher in our school board. She is an Arabic speaker, and she did her first lesson in this classroom. And you can see her son is sitting there, and they feel so much pride in seeing their parent coming up to the classroom and doing a little class, teaching the students how to say numbers in Arabic. Here's a parent. They're from India. This was, of course, pre-COVID days when we could bring food into the classroom. So she also did some henna for the students, and she brought samosas into the classroom to share. And then we did the Diwali presentation. Me and the student, we prepared a Diwali presentation for the classroom. So this was a fun thing. We also had bindis, like the little dots for all the girls in the classroom. Some cultural activities involving the entire school. You could have a language fair, that is all the languages that are spoken in the school can be, you could have them all in the gym with different stations, for each language a different station. So this was the Arabic station, learning Arabic from your classmates and their family. And this was the parent volunteer teaching Hindi on the Hindi station. And a little facts about the languages are also pasted on the whiteboard right next to the station. This is students learning some basic Spanish from a classmate and a parent volunteer. Students teaching Tagalog to their classmates. And they are so pleased to do this. You can see that big smile on their faces. And this little girl had also brought some candy from which her parents had got from the Philippines just during that time. So she was sharing some candy from the Philippines with her friends. And that's learning Punjabi. This was at the local library. We did a language fair with Nova Scotia international students. American Sign Language was also a part of the language fair, and this young person was teaching students how to use the American Sign Language, and she was just amazing at it. Students learning Hindi phrases at another school here. Zulu. We have a parent from who speaks Zulu here, and they had a little station with all these little things from paraphernalia and stuff to show from Zulu, and they shared language. She also had a picture book.
So we know that in the schools that we try, the teachers, the staff, everybody tries with the EAL teacher to make the students feel comfortable. But outside of school hours, encourage your students, all the students, to get involved with outreach activities where they can help newcomers with integration, like the Newcomers Club or volunteering, etc. Students could offer to teach newcomers in their classroom to ice skate, rollerblade, play ice hockey, toboggan, etc., ski, and do other winter activities. Read storybooks, preferably with a lot of pictures. In the elementary school, the teachers can talk to some parents and arrange a play date for the newcomer. And in middle school and high school, students should be encouraged to join sports, school clubs, have the student council meet the newcomers, and make them aware of what teams and clubs are available. And that's really important at the middle school and high school, because oftentimes when there's an announcement made, the student really doesn't, because of the language, they don't hear it or they don't really understand, because it's usually made very quickly. So it's really important that that information is passed along to them so they can join these clubs. And usually we get the student council on board to help out with that. And the next slide is just the Y-Reach and the different, in all the communities, Y-Reach have different activities. And the homework hub, I think, is through that now. But anyway, they do all different activities that encourage the students, like after school, and get involved in stuff. And I think they also provide programs and the local library does this for the parents or the adults.
Also, Y-Reach is only available in rural Nova Scotia. So the people living in Halifax, they have other resources. It's the Department of Education.
Yeah. That's the, if you want to go in and find some other webinars and some other information, you can go into this site that's listed there and go on to the EAL website. There's all kinds of stuff that you can find there, along with other recordings of webinars. And there's websites and apps. There's a list of them here. A lot of these are free, and the Google Translate is there, Wordly, Text Compactor, and these might be things that you're already using in the classroom. Epic Books for dual language, Book Creator, Live Worksheets is really good. The RAS books, the dual books are excellent. So all of these sites can help the EAL student. And we also have Book Creator for Chromebook, Sketch, Sentence Building, Actions, Emotions. I love Math Monster and Grammar Monster. I love it for middle school and high school. The last thing, oh, I'm sorry. Is there anybody want to share some of their ideas, or is there any questions that you'd like to ask us at this time?
Oh, YMCA school settlement staff. Yeah, Peru. Yeah, oh, Peru. Yeah. I've heard about that. Peru in Halifax, the YMCA school settlement staff.
So I think this next slide is special days in different cultures.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly, it's just an information so that you are aware of these things, because Ramadan is a month long and your students will be fasting around that time. So it's just something to keep in mind, because sometimes they are tired and not focused, maybe want to take some extra break. So just be aware of them, or aware of these things, that this is that time period when the Ramadan happens. And maybe also a good time to do a little presentation. Your student might be ready to do a presentation about Ramadan or Eid or Diwali, for example. It doesn't have to be done around that time itself, but could be a little bit a week here and there. It doesn't matter. But just to bring that information into your classroom and share it with the other students in your classroom is a great idea. Chinese New Year and the Asian Heritage Month, Children's Day in Japan. So just a few things to share with you.
The next slide is just some more resources for teachers. Teachingrefugees.com, uniteforliteracy.com, childrenslibrary.org, and the dual books, Tattletales. There's many. And there's lots of free sites if you go on, and once you check it out to make sure that you're allowed to use it in school, there's some really good sites that you can add to your Google Classroom. My EAL students love it. They love the Google Classroom. They go in, I put stuff in there to help them. If I know the teacher's doing something in the classroom, I will add stuff to it so that they have that little extra support at home. And Allison says she plays lots of games to have students practice. Yes. Go Fish and Guess Who. They are good. Excellent.
Go
good idea. Yeah. And on the back here, there's some more resources. I'm not going to read them all. There is a little link there on the bottom. Crystal Dirtle, who is an EAL teacher in the Cape Breton Victoria Regional Education Center, she created this little, it's a little picture dictionary, and it's really neat. She uses it a lot with the elementaries, and especially a student when their language is really low, it gives them some survival skills. So I put the link there for anyone that, and if you want the link, if this doesn't work, just send me a message, or I can put it in the chat if you like.
Thank you, Millie. Yeah, that's a good one.